Hello, everyone. Today, we're going to be talking about breaking free from destructive mindsets, harnessing cognitive flexibility for growth. So, to start off, just to review the agenda, we're going to be going through understanding mindsets, identifying these mindsets, cultivating cognitive flexibility, and then shifting towards growth-oriented mindsets. So, what are mindsets? Mindsets are these mental frameworks or beliefs that shape how we view ourselves, others, and the world around us, influence our thoughts, feelings, behaviors, and impact how we approach challenges and opportunities. And so, three main ones that we're going to be focusing on today are first off, destructive mindsets, which is this overriding belief that negative patterns of thinking and behavior are unchangeable or justified. We'll also be talking about fixed mindsets, which is this belief that abilities and intelligence are static and they're unchanging. And then a growth mindset, where the belief is that abilities and intelligence can be developed with effort. So, in general, mindsets, we're going to go through these three areas of perceptions of ourselves, others, and the world, influence on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, and how they impact our approach to challenges and opportunities. So, first off, with the perceptions, how they influence the perceptions of ourselves, others, and the world. So, it almost acts as a lens through which we are perceiving these things. And so, the mindset can act as a filter through which we interpret these experiences. So, really, this is thinking of like putting on glasses, and you can have different tints and shades on them. So, while you may be looking at the same things, you are perceiving them differently. And so this impacts bias, where it's shaping the assumptions and judgments about people and situations. And it's impacting these core ideas about what is possible or true in our lives and surroundings. So this is really that influence on how we perceive things and how we interpret them. And so this leads to the second area of the influence on thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. So with different mindsets, it can lead to different emotional triggers. So, how we react emotionally to events. And so, we'll see that different events, when they occur, yes, our perceptions can change, but also how we react emotionally can be dependent on the mindset that we have. There's also cognitive patterns. So, it's shaping how we process and frame information, as well as behavioral tendencies. So this is how it's guiding our actions, habits, and decision making. And then lastly, our mindsets can influence how we approach challenges and opportunities. So first off, this idea of resilience. So a mindset's role in bouncing back from setbacks. When you have more of a growth mindset, it's going to be a little bit easier to bounce back. When you have a destructive mindset, it's going to be much more difficult. It also influences our adaptability. So the willingness to explore new strategies or solutions are going to be influenced by our mindset, and then how we orient ourselves around problem solving. So the readiness to engage constructively with challenges is going to vary based off the mindset that we have. So let's dive a little bit deeper into destructive mindsets. So these mindsets are actively harming our well-being and productivity. They're destructive. And so what they do is they create mental barriers. They can prevent adaptation to change, and they can reinforce negative thought cycles. And so why do they need to be addressed? Well, they impede our growth. They can harm relationships and self-esteem, and they can limit our potential by keeping us stuck in unproductive loops. Some examples of destructive mindsets can be rumination. So this is focusing excessively on past failures or mistakes. And I'll even throw in further that you're focusing on the past failure or mistake, but you're not learning from it. It's almost this obsessive focus on what you did wrong, not what you can do better. There can be a resistance to change, so avoiding new ideas or opportunities due to fear. There can be all or nothing thinking, seeing situations in extremes with no middle ground, and then self-sabotage, so doubting oneself to the point of inaction or failure. Now, just a quick aside, Shirzad Shamin's work on positive intelligence tackles this concept of saboteurs. And these are destructive mindsets that lie to you about why you need them. And so this was in his book, Positive Intelligence. It's a great read in developing your positive intelligence and understanding what these are. And so these were the saboteurs that he identified. Mine number one saboteur right now is the controller. And so this is a almost a defense mechanism that steps in that tells me that I need to control things. And this is actually a destructive mindset that I need to control. And if I don't control, and so I just wanted to do a quick aside to shout out that there are different ways of looking at mindsets and different influences. And this is a great read for those that may want to dive a little bit deeper. So let's just go through an example and see these different lenses of mindsets and how it can influence us. So if you've been asked to give a presentation next week, but public speaking makes you uncomfortable, here's a situation we're facing. So with a fixed mindset, the belief is that I'm just not good at public speaking and I never will be. And so what the process looks like is you avoid preparing or practicing because you feel like it's futile. You focus on the fear of embarrassment or failure. And what this leads to is you are going to have poor performance during the presentation due to a lack of effort. Why would I try harder if it's never going to change? And so what ends up happening is this then reinforces the belief that public speaking is an innate ability that you just lack. So this is very much just staying with the status quo. It can lead to a little bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. By not practicing, then you don't grow, you don't do any better, you're fixed in place. Now, with a destructive mindset, the belief is that this is going to be a disaster no matter what I do. So why bother? And what this process looks like is you engage in negative self-talk. Everyone will judge me, I'll mess up badly. And then this leads to a bit of procrastinating and avoiding the preparation. You're actively avoiding it. And you're blaming external factors for your discomfort or lack of success. Now, where this is a little bit different from a fixed mindset is this negative self-talk. You're not just avoiding and letting the process go with the status quo, where you're actually spending your mental energy is on things that are sabotaging yourself. You're working yourself up, you're increasing your anxiety levels. And so what this is doing is it's actually negatively impacting the outcome. And so what we see here is the outcome is experiencing heightened anxiety or even refusing to present. And then this damages your confidence in professional relationships or academic relationships due to that avoidance or poor performance. Now, the positive mindset of a growth mindset. And so this is the belief that I'm not confident in public speaking yet, but I can improve with practice. And so this process looks like seeking resources. So watching presentations, practicing with a colleague or a friend, and you're reframing these mistakes as learning opportunities to do better. And you're focusing on making these gradual improvements rather than perfection. And so you can see just from the get-go, there is more opportunities for growth built in here. You're looking for opportunities to do better as opposed to avoiding, which is then leading to poorer outcomes. So the outcome here is that you deliver a better presentation with noticeable effort and improvement. And it builds confidence and a sense of accomplishment, even if the presentation isn't perfect, because you're viewing any challenges that come from that as opportunities to grow moving forward. Now, a key piece about a growth mindset that I just want to throw in here is it doesn't lead to an outcome that's perfect, but the way you view this is a stepping stone to be able to do continual improvements over time. So a fixed mindset leads to stagnation. A destructive mindset is an amplification of self-sabotage, actually doing worse. And then a growth mindset fosters positive outcomes. Great. So now what? Mindsets aren't permanent. They can be changed. You can also have mindsets that are influencing different aspects of your life. You could have a destructive mindset in one area of your life, but then you can have a growth mindset in another. For example, you may have a fixed mindset when it comes to social relations, but then you may have a growth mindset when it comes to work in general. You may have a destructive mindset when it comes to self-care and managing a home and things like that. So you can have it in different contexts, but the one thing that's really important is not to let a fixed mindset influence you here, or a destructive mindset. You can adapt these mindsets. You can change them on both a micro level for the specific situations you're facing, but then you can also influence them on more of a macro level, looking at things in more of a global context. What's more of a global mindset? What's my go-to mindset? So there's two key pieces. Self-monitoring and cognitive flexibility, when taken together, gives you the ability to shift towards growth mindsets. And so self-monitoring is the ability to reflect on and know which mindset you are using, or the way you're viewing the world or that situation. And then cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt how you're thinking about things. And so this really is, when taken together, we can know when we have destructive mindsets, and then we can have the ability to flex that mindset to a more productive one. So, identifying destructive and fixed mindsets. So, before we can break free from these mindsets, we need to first know that there is a problem. We need to know that something's holding us back. And so, let's just go through some indicators and examples here of these two. So, first, with the fixed mindset, some indicators are you avoid challenges. You may view effort as a sign of inadequacy, and you can feel threatened by other successes. And so some examples here is a situation, maybe a student receives a low grade on a test. And so the response here is that I'm not good at this subject. No amount of studying will help. And then the impact is that they stop trying, and it reinforces their belief of inability. So by believing that you can never improve, you don't even really try. Now, a destructive mindset is, some indicators are persistent negative self-talk. So this isn't just the I'm bad, so I'm not going to try. It's actually destructive thoughts. These negative self-talk. I'm a failure. And so this leads to avoiding of responsibility by blaming external factors. So it's not just avoiding because I can't do better. It's avoiding by actually blaming things outside of your control, because you're not focusing on your own growth. You're focusing on how can I externalize this so it's not my fault. And so these self-sabotaging behaviors can be things like procrastination or denial. Now, a lot of this that you'll see about destructive mindsets is, with a lot of people, they don't know how to grow. They don't know how to learn or how to make these learning opportunities to do better. And so some of this defense mechanism kicks in by blaming external factors, because that at least makes them feel better about themselves. And so where there is a lot of potential for coaching is when people are feeling like they may be in these destructive mindsets because they just can't tap into the growth mindset. They don't know where to improve. They don't know where to focus efforts. So now an example here might be a situation where an employee is asked to lead a project, but they doubt their own abilities. And so the response is, I'm going to fail anyway, so why bother preparing? And this procrastination and this negative self-talk can lead to poor results, and this damages their confidence further, which makes it even harder moving forward. So here are some questions to help identify your mindset. So, some general awareness questions. What story am I telling myself about this situation? Am I focused on what I can control or what I can't? And do I believe this outcome is final, or do I see it as part of a learning process? And so these are just ways to help you begin to think about how you're thinking about these things. How are you approaching these things? And based on these answers, you can start to identify which mindset is predominant. So what story am I telling myself about this situation? Is there a lot of things focusing on yourself or external factors? Are you telling yourself that you'll never be able to improve? Well, that may be a fixed mindset. Are you focusing on things you can control or things you can't? So when you're focusing on things you can control and you're trying to make some changes, then that might be a growth mindset that you're utilizing there. And so always viewing things as a learning process as well. How can I use this to learn and grow? Growth mindset. Now, when you face challenges and setbacks, you can ask yourself, how do I typically react to these setbacks? Do I see them as failures or opportunities? What is my first instinct when I face a challenge, avoidance or engagement? And do I feel afraid to try because of a fear of judgment or failure? Then moving on to effort and improvement, do I believe my efforts will improve my results? When I succeed, do I credit luck or my hard work? When others succeed, do I feel inspired or envious? When analyzing your own self-talk, you can ask yourself, what words do I use to describe myself when something doesn't go as planned? And do I often use absolutes like always or never? For example, I always fail. That more black and white thinking of just A or B, in this case, always, never, that is a sign of either fixed mindsets or destructive mindsets. And then perspective on feedback. Do I welcome feedback or do I avoid it to protect my self esteem? And how do I usually respond to constructive criticism, defensiveness, or curiosity? Now, we'll come back to this, but a quick tip. If you're struggling to answer these questions in your own head, write them down. Talk them out loud with some other people. And we'll talk about some more of these tips and tricks a little bit later. But sometimes when we do these things in our own head, we can bias our answers to make ourselves feel better. But when we write things out or talk them out loud, we get it out of our head into reality in some form, then it's easier to conduct some self-analysis. So, in general, you want to be asking the question, are my perceptions of the world and thoughts about it holding me in place, pulling me down, or providing opportunities for growth? And so, if the way you're approaching something is holding you in place, fixed mindset. If something is pulling you down, your thoughts are actively harming you, how you're approaching things, destructive mindset. And then providing opportunities for growth mindset. Now, I do want to just do a quick highlight here. If you're struggling to tell the difference, if you're asking yourself, well, what's the difference? Like, I can't tell if it's a destructive or a fixed mindset. It doesn't really matter. And the reason why I say this is we want to get to a growth mindset anyway. And so what's more important is just to know, am I using a growth mindset or not? If you're not using a growth mindset, then we want to move towards trying to incorporate some strategies to shift over, which we'll talk about. So, just some additional strategies in knowing which mindset is impacting you. You can keep a thought journal. So, write down recurring thoughts when facing challenges, successes, or setbacks. Look for some patterns of self limiting beliefs or rigidity. You can use mindset indicators. So, evaluate situations where you felt stuck. Ask, was I open to new solutions? Did I focus on learning or blame external factors? You can seek feedback, ask a trusted friend, colleague, or mentor, or coach to share their perspective on how you respond to challenges. Sometimes others may notice these patterns that you can't see yourself. You can use mindfulness practices. So, mindfulness to pause and observe your thoughts in real time without judgment. This can reveal whether you're leaning towards rigidity or adaptability. Now, mindsets can be really important because when we are in like ruminating thoughts, destructive mindsets, or these fixed mindsets, our brains are going in almost a fight or flight response mode. We can be very much of just trying to protect ourselves. And when you have those spinning thoughts, those rapid thoughts, it can be very hard to pause and see that they're having a negative impact. And so mindfulness is really breaking in these kind of mental pauses for ourselves to slow ourselves down. I like to sometimes compare this to a hamster wheel. And so when a hamster gets on that hamster wheel, their instinct is just to run, 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 run. And so what ends up happening is that's like our thoughts with destructive mindsets. It's just going, 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 but with destructive thoughts or with focusing on everything out of our control. And that's where our anxiety can come in. And so mindfulness is almost like forcing the hamster off the hamster wheel, making them stop, making them get off. And so a hamster doesn't just jump right back onto the hamster wheel. They can think about, well, what do I need to do? Because they're not going as instinctually anymore. They're able to kind of think strategically. And so mindfulness is a way to do the same for your brain. Get off that hamster wheel of ruminating thoughts. Now, a mindset assessment, so you can reflect on areas similar to the questions that we just went through before. You can go through this and see, like, high level, what is the general flow of my mindset right now? So reflect on areas like effort, failure, feedback, and challenges, and rate yourself on a spectrum from rigid or destructive to flexible and growth oriented. So this is like self-monitoring scales where you can even have like a 1 to 10 scale, 1 being rigid and destructive and 10 being flexible and growth oriented, and give yourself a grade. You can also check emotional signals. So notice how you react emotionally to stressful situations. So are you reacting with fear or avoidance, which often points to a fixed or destructive mindset. And then lastly, curiosity or calmness can indicate some of that flexibility and openness. So now let's talk a little bit about cognitive flexibility. So we are just talking about how to know which mindset we're in, how to identify that, how to self-monitor our mindset. But now I want to talk a bit about, well, how do we set ourselves up to be able to shift? And so cognitive flexibility is important. So, first off, fixed and destructive mindsets keep us stuck. And cognitive flexibility provides a pathway out by enabling us to have the ability to change our perspectives, to adapt to new circumstances, and to break free from our limiting thought patterns. So, cognitive flexibility is the ability to adapt your thinking, shift your perspectives, and embrace new approaches to challenges. Now, what's important here is cognitive flexibility is just that. It's the ability to be able to be flexible. It's not the actual action of shifting your mindset, but rather it's building up your brain's capacity to be able to shift to new mindsets and new ways of thinking. So, why does it matter? Cognitive flexibility enhances our problem solving by encouraging the ability to think about alternative solutions. It builds resilience and emotional balance during setbacks, and it helps support growth by helping individuals embrace learning and change. And so, just some of the neuroscience behind it. Flexibility encourages or engages the prefrontal cortex, allowing for planning and adapting. And neuroplasticity supports the brain's ability to form new patterns. And dopamine does facilitate this motivation and creative thinking. Now, just a quick aside. When thinking about neuroplasticity, you want to think about your neural pathways in your brain. And so your traditional ways of thinking, your current ways of thinking, they've established neural pathways. And so I sometimes like to think of this as like a college campus in the wintertime. And on the quad, when there's a snowstorm, all the pathways can get covered by snow. And what ends up happening is people start to walk through and carve a new pathway. Now, what this is doing the first time you walk down that new pathway is very difficult. You have to step into the snow and you're the first one doing it. But what ends up happening is more people will walk down those similar steps. And slowly the pathway becomes easier and easier to access. And so that ability of carving that new pathway, that is analogous to cognitive flexibility. How readily can we carve these new neural pathways and then slowly start to use those pathways instead of our original ones? Now, another quick aside. Everyone's brains can be a little bit different. And so this dopamine, which helps facilitate motivation and creative thinking, not everyone is going to get the same kind of dopamine high reaction to certain adaptations of thinking. And so what can be important here is if your brain isn't giving you that same fuel to fuel this motivation and creative thinking, then we may need to build in alternative ways to give that similar brain high. And so just to compare this over, for some people, having a clean bed is very motivating. It just feels good, right? And so that might be a dopamine response to having a clean bed and making your bed. Whereas for some other people, they might not get that same dopamine hit. And so what they may do is after they clean their bed, they do some rewarding activity that gives them that similar dopamine high, but it's not naturally occurring. And so they pair it. And so just a quick thing to know. Now, cultivating cognitive flexibility. Going to go through a bunch of different strategies here. Some are going to be more specifically applicable to mindsets, and other ones are going to be about general cognitive flexibility. So, when cultivating cognitive flexibility, a great exercise is perspective taking. And so, imagine the same situation you're facing from three different viewpoints. So, it might be your own, a mentor's, and an outsider's. So, this is just practicing viewing things in different ways, but you're using other people to help frame that for yourself. And so, by doing perspective taking, you're just stretching your brain a little bit. You're stretching just like in yoga, and I'm going to use a lot of a yoga analogy throughout here. Whereas in yoga, you might be stretching your muscles, but with these exercises, you're stretching your brain's cognitive flexibility. So you can do brainstorming alternatives. So force yourself to generate three potential solutions, even if they initially seem unrealistic. And the goal here is to practice considering multiple pathways to an end result. Now, one thing I will always share over, my favorite thing to share as a tip for brainstorming, bad ideas are great for brainstorming. Not, they shouldn't be the idea you end up choosing, but a good bad idea helps us see more about better ideas. It's comparative. We're able to see it. They reference one another. Now you can do yes and thinking. And so what you want to do is replace no but with yes and. And we'll talk a bit about the importance of language a little bit later when we're talking to ourselves. So when you replace with yes and, especially when presented with new ideas, it helps you lead to building upon the ideas as opposed to changing the idea and shutting it down. So when you go with no but, it's a shutdown of one perspective, one idea, and it's going back to our current way of thinking. Whereas when we use the language of yes and, we're incorporating those ideas and building upon it. There's also mental stretching. So, regularly challenging yourself with questions that don't have a right answer. And so, for example, what are three completely different ways to approach this problem? Or how would someone from a different field solve this challenge? And so, again, this is similar to perspective taking, but what you're doing is you're trying to just think in different ways. Again, flexing how we think. You can also break routines, so change small habits to challenge your brain's reliance on the familiar. So this might be take a new route to work, walk to school instead of taking the bus, brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand, or maybe order something different from the menu. I know these all can seem small, but it's very important to realize that small stretches are how you build up your flexibility. So just like in yoga, you don't just jump in and start doing master stretches. You start off with small stretches to build up that flexibility, to be able to build up towards a bigger stretch. And so that's a perfect example of a growth mindset there, but now applied to cognitive flexibility. You could do role reversal practice. So imagine yourself in someone else's role during a conflict or decision. So you can consider the perspective of a customer if you're a service provider. That way to understand where they are coming from. There can also be creative constraints. So give yourself a task, but introduce a constraint to encourage out of the box thinking. So, for example, write a story, but every sentence must start with the same letter. So, these cognitive, creative constraints are forcing us to think in a different way because of that constraint. Now, some more. So crosswords and word games. So crossword puzzles, anagrams, word searches, and then other problem solving and lateral thinking exercises. These are great. They actually have been proven to help increase some cognitive flexibility. And so you can use apps like the New York Times crossword or Wordscapes can help make this more accessible. And again, there's a lot of puns and wordplay, which we'll move on to right now in these games, thinking about words with different meanings. And these are all little mental stretches to do. So puns and wordplay. So by playing with puns, it helps encourage flexibility in how you view language and meaning. So an exercise may be to create as many puns as possible with a given topic. This example here is fruit, so that's grape news. It's just a way to stretch how our brains are working and interpreting things. Strategy games like chess, Sudoku, or even strategic video games enhance our adaptive thinking. So, for example, in chess, thinking several moves ahead mirrors real world flexibility and planning. There are things out of your control, and then you need to adapt to a changing environment. Learning new skills is great. So, practicing a new skill rewires your brain for adaptability. So, some examples include learning a musical instrument or a new language, experimenting with a new recipe, or do it yourself project. So, great ways because these are new neural pathways that you need to be creating. Opposite day exercise. So, deliberately challenge your default decisions for one day. If you always say no to morning exercise, say yes and try it out. Just slight changes in how you're doing things. Again, it's slight flexibility and stretching. Um, the five new uses game. So you can pick an everyday object and brainstorm five alternative uses for it. So a paperclip could be a keychain or a zipper pull or a bookmark. And so by putting things to new usage, you're helping rewire some parts in your brain of how these things can be used. Unfinished story, so you can start a story and stop halfway, and then you can challenge yourself to finish it in three completely different ways. And then lastly, maybe a little bit of like a personal debate club. So choosing a topic and arguing both sides of the debate, switching perspectives midway. Again, all of these are just about flexing and stretching how we are using our brain, which is building up our capabilities to then apply that to other situations, namely our mindsets. So now really focusing on the shifting towards growth-oriented mindsets. So here are some techniques to replace destructive mindsets with adaptive ones. Cognitive reframing. So actively challenging and changing the way you think about a situation or belief. So you may have a destructive thought of, I failed this test, so I'm a failure, but let's actively challenge that and reframe it. And so the reframed thought may be, I struggled this time, but I learned where I need to improve. So this is a great way that if you did write out this thought of, I failed this test, so I'm a failure, you can see it and then force yourself to think of a way to think differently, to reframe that in a different way. Self-compassion, so treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you'd offer a friend. So the strategy may be to replace self-criticism with constructive language and practicing forgiveness for mistakes and focus on moving forward. You can also do small goal setting. So you can break these larger goals into smaller manageable steps to create momentum and build confidence. And so the example here might be, instead of I need to become a great public speaker, you can start with I'll practice speaking for 5 minutes in front of a friend. Now the importance here, these little wins are still wins and they can build up our confidence and they can show that you don't need to make a huge step of growth, but we can make incremental steps with growth. Some more, you can practice gratitude. So gratitude is shifting your focus from what's lacking to what's positive, creating a more adaptive outlook. And so you can write down 3 things you're grateful for each day, even small things. This is helping us reframe where our focus is on, as opposed to focusing on the negative, we're focusing on the positive. And so you can reframe challenges by identifying hidden benefits. This tough project is teaching me new skills. You can reframe failure as feedback. So seeing failure as a source of information can reduce fear and it helps promote growth. So after setback, ask yourself, what can I learn from this? You can focus on specific takeaways. Next time, I'll allocate more time for the presentation. And so this is where we're really trying to ensure that we are learning from poor outcomes instead of just focusing on all the negatives of it. It's what can we do with this new information? You can use the what if technique. So this encourages curiosity and opens up possibilities. And so you can ask what if questions to expand thinking. And some of the examples include, what if I approach this project with a beginner's mindset? And what if I took a completely different route to solve this problem? You can create an I can list. And so this helps reinforce a sense of capability and combats negative self-talk. And so you can list things you've overcome or succeeded at in the past, and you can use a list as evidence that you're capable of growth and resilience. And so this is almost like providing your brain with evidence that you can grow, you can develop. And I do tend to do this a lot in coaching, where every now and then I'll start hearing some destructive mindset thoughts and comments from clients, and I'll just reframe and pause and where were we 6 months ago? Where have we come to? And this helps defeat those thoughts that I can't grow with evidence of I can, because I have grown. You can break the cycle with action. So small actions create this momentum and they can challenge mental inertia. And so by identifying one small immediate step you can take towards a goal, this is, and then focusing on progress, not perfection. And so if you're overwhelmed with a project, start with a 5-minute brainstorm. This just recently happened with me, where I needed to do work over the weekend, but I didn't know where to start. And so all I did was I started with writing out a list of what I needed to do. And just by starting there with that action, I was able to then start kicking into productivity and moving forward. And then surround yourself with growth oriented people. So mindsets are influenced by the attitudes of those around us. And so you can seek out mentors, peers, or communities that value growth and adaptability, share goals and challenges with supportive individuals in your life. So now, just quickly, language matters. Even in our internal monologue, this is really, really important. And so the power of language, it shapes our perception. So the words we use influence how we see ourselves, others, and situations. So saying I can't versus I haven't figured this out yet, it changes how we approach challenges. If we keep telling ourselves I can't, I can't, I can't, we're never going to try. Versus I haven't figured this out yet, it keeps you open to I'm going to figure this out. And so language reinforces belief. So this internal monologue can act as a loop, and this can either strengthen our growth or destructive mindsets. And so positive language helps build up confidence and opens up possibilities, and negative language fuels doubt and limits actions. And so this is where it is sometimes important, just in your head, all of these things can be difficult to analyze and be critical of. And so by taking those thoughts out, you can really look at them of, is this negative self-talk or is this positive self-talk? And so getting the language out of your head, it turns abstract feelings into concrete ideas, making them easier to analyze and shift. And so this creates awareness. Identifying and naming destructive patterns is a first step to change. It also encourages objectivity, so externalizing thoughts helps us see them more clearly and question their validity. And lastly, it builds intentionality. So writing or verbalizing goals and affirmations reinforces commitment and clarity. So thank you for watching today. You can leave questions either in the comments section or you can shoot me an email. My email is either right here, what's listed, cschmaliker at nfil.net, or you can also just email Casey at nfil.net. Always happy to answer and field any questions. And as always, if you're looking more interested in coaching, you can always reach out. You can go to our website, www.nfil.net, or you can shoot us an email or give us a call. And so we look forward. We hope that you can grasp in and lean into growth mindsets with this. But I do want to share, just because something seems simple does not make it easy. And so we wish you the best of luck on your journey towards leading into growth mindsets.